Theirs is the kingdom of God. Blessed are they, full of sorrow, they shall be consoled. Rejoice and be glad. Blessed are you, holy are you. Rejoice and be glad. Yours is the kingdom of God. Blessed are they, the lowly ones, they shall inherit the earth. Blessed are they who hunger and thirst, they shall have their fill. Rejoice and be glad. Blessed are you, holy are you. Rejoice and be glad. Yours is the kingdom of God.
Greetings again, and welcome to Midweek Moments from St. John's Baptist Church in Charlotte, North Carolina. My name is Dennis Faust, and I have the privilege and blessing of serving as senior minister of St. John's, a wonderful community of faith. And if you live in the Charlotte area and you're looking for a faith community that practices the way of Jesus as servants in the world, please consider joining with us and becoming part of our community. It is our practice during this time of pandemic and physical distancing and separation to try to take a few moments each week between Sundays and try to keep us connected around some thinking. Of course, there's an awful lot going on these days. And so this week I share some thoughts with you about where we are as a community of faith and where we are as people just in general at this time as residents in these United States. Several years ago, our family walked through a building called WonderWorks in Orlando, Florida. I think it's on International Drive there. It's a little disorienting to walk into that upside down house. There's a story told that it was actually a secret laboratory in somewhere located out in the Atlantic, I believe in the Bermuda Triangle. And a hurricane or a storm came along and picked it up and dropped it in Orlando upside down. When you walk into the house, everything's upside down except you. And it's a little disorienting. We were right side up though, even though it felt as if we were upside down. The context of the house being upside down did not change the reality that we were right side up. One news reporter recently commented, "The killing of George Floyd has turned the world upside down." Now, I'm not trying to be argumentative. However, it seems to me as if the killing of George Floyd and the understandable protests and cries of outrage, the demands for change, the actions of violence even, these have all occurred because the world is already upside down. As part of the people of God in the world, as followers of the way of Jesus, we are living right side up. We are living right side up in this upside down world. We may feel disoriented at times, but it's not because we are upside down. We are living our lives according to the way of Jesus. And so we are right side up. Now, living during this global pandemic and watching how godliness is part of our perspective and the pursuit of our living, we must always remember that just because we define godliness a certain way, we really need to make sure we're describing godliness, defining godliness the way God defines godliness. Jesus gives us some road signs there. He teaches us how to live in godly ways, and he shows us characteristics of godliness. We need to pay attention to this because this is how we know we're living right side up in a downside up world. But we see in the world how evil or ungodliness is presents itself as malice, as mean-spiritedness, as greed, as systemic racism, as hatred, as manipulative power, brutality, violence. We see how all of these things are at work in the world, and we may question from time to time whether the world is upside down or whether we are upside down. But I would remind you that all of the godly actions that you are initiating, that we're initiating together, they do make a difference. Our efforts, our initiatives, our collaborations, they're all contributing to a better world. Consider that upside down world of the first century, when those first disciples of the way of Jesus carried his message forward into that world, a conflict world, a world of persecution and abuse, manipulative power, violence, racism, etc. The world has been changing throughout the centuries, evolving, if you will. There have been cultural shifts, migrations, discoveries, wars, times of peace, economies of trade. There have been times where we have traveled and learned to understand one another with increased ways. We've gained knowledge and scientific inquiry. We've learned by trial and error at times, but we've changed a lot since the first century, and yet in ways there's still remnants that remind us that the first century and this century have many similarities. Well, there's nothing that has transformed humanity more than the good news or the gospel of God. This good news is revealed in Jesus and his teachings, in his life and in his ministry is what we seek to continue today. So I would remind you of what Paul wrote to that church in Corinth. And I want to read part of this passage from 2 Corinthians 4 to you. I want to read it to you in the translation or the work offered to us by Eugene Peterson in what we call the Message. Since God has so generously let us in on what God is up to doing, then we're not about to throw up our hands and walk off the job just because we run into an occasional hard time. We're not maneuvering, we're not manipulating behind the scenes. We don't twist God's truth or God's good news just to suit ourselves. We are remembering that our message is not about us. We are proclaiming the message that Jesus gave us to proclaim. It started when God said, "Let there be light. Light up the darkness." Our lives have filled up with light, and we have seen and we have understood God in the life of Jesus. So if you only look at us, you might well miss the brightness. We're just carrying this light of God, this message of God around in our unadorned clay pots, our ordinary lives. That's to prevent anyone from confusing God's incomparable power with us. Now, we've been surrounded and battered by troubles, but we're not demoralized. We're not sure what to do sometimes, but we do know that God knows what to do. We've been spiritually terrorized, but God has never left our side. We've been thrown down, but we've never been broken. So even though on the outside it often looks as if things are falling apart, on the inside, where God is making new life, not a day goes by without God's unfolding grace renewing us, recreating us. These difficult times are small potatoes compared to the lavish celebration that God is preparing for us. There's far more here than what meets the human eye. The things that we see now are here today, gone tomorrow, but the things that we cannot see will last forever. Beloved, each week as I study and write and record these midweek moments or Sunday messages, I pray for you. I pray for your persevering spirit, for your encouragement. And I pray that my thoughts will be used by the living God to equip you and possibly to inspire you in your work of ministry and daily life. Well, during these months of pandemic and physical distancing and convulsing junctures of societal awakening to a better world, we are continuing to discern God's voice among all the voices clamoring for our attention. We're making choices to collaborate and to serve God in the way of Jesus. Now, it's going to take more than words, and it's going to take more than protests. It's going to take more than conversations or legislation to move us past centuries of lies, deception, and evil that brings us to these kinds of times. Systemic racism and injustice that feed today's violence can only be changed when human spirits, listening to the Spirit of God's voice within us, make choices to live together in the ways of God as revealed in our following of Jesus. So I'm asking you to join me as we continue to seek the ways of moving forward together. Let's show our city how a servant church learns more and more how to follow Jesus. Let's move beyond the need of getting everyone to agree with us. Let's work harder at trying to understand how the other person thinks and why the other person has a different perspective from us. And let's work at helping another person understand how we come to our perspective. Let's recommit ourselves individually and congregationally to doing justice and loving mercy and walking humbly with God. Let's do so by sincerely loving one another, loving our neighbors, and even loving our enemies. This past week, we released a congregational statement that several of our church leaders have been talking about for a couple of weeks now. But this statement positions us as a church. It's not my words, it's words written by several of our church leaders that our chair of our diaconate has released. But you'll hear in this statement people from a wide variety of life experiences. But it's a statement by us, about us. It's a statement of our intentions as a people. And one of the things it says in this statement that I encourage you to go to our website and read it, or go on our Facebook page and look at that statement. And basically what it says is we want to continue to work to diminish the effects of injustice in our world. And so I'm asking you to join me this summer in reading some books, and I'll be talking about passages from these books and different ways in which we can learn from them. One of the books I'm going to ask you to get and to read with me this summer is a book entitled The Color of Compromise. The subtitle of the book is The Truth About the American Church's Complicity in Racism. Sometimes I think we forget that we've been complicit as a church. In fact, slavery itself was not only condoned, it's what gave birth to the Southern Baptist Convention that we left long time ago, decades and decades ago, close to 40 years ago now. We left the Southern Baptist Convention, but we still have that remnant of practice in our culture and in our lives, and we need to learn about it. Another book that I'll be talking with you about some passages that you might want to read is entitled Divided by Faith, and some research that's been done on how the church varies in its perspective about racism in today's world. And then next week, during Midweek Moments, you're going to view some interview time that I'm going to present to you. It's around this book, The Sun Does Shine, How I Found Life and Freedom on Death Row. It's written by a gentleman by the name of Anthony Ray Hinton, who was imprisoned in Alabama on death row for decades for crimes he did not commit. And so I'm going to be discussing this book with Leslie Bragg, and she teaches this book in high school in her literature classes in her English department there at the high school where she teaches in Davidson. So we're going to discuss that book, and I'll be bringing passages of that to you. So we're going to work together this summer in ways that we can continue this work, even the work that we are still learning how to do much better. I would remind you of what Jesus said. If you feel disheartened, if you feel burdened down, come to me, Jesus said. Come to me, all of you who are weary and burdened down by this upside down world, and I will give you rest, Jesus said. Yoke yourself to me, he offered. Learn from me, Jesus said. I am gentle and humble in spirit, and you will find a way to live in this upside down world by living right side up. This coming Sunday, our summer worship series will begin, and we'll be focusing on the Beatitudes this summer. I'm going to present these to you as some of Jesus' instructions, ways that we are living right side up in a world that is upside down. Now, it is important to me that we all pray together every day. So would you pray with me in coming weeks of the summer as we take a journey of learning together how we can make a difference in this time as part of the people of God in the world following the way of Jesus. Shalom.